over here. Do some over here. Over here.
Oh, really? Yeah, it panned on some of my friends, by the way.
Y'all want to sit down, I think, and after you finish, make sure that you get out of the way so that, okay, thank you. You got people behind you, and I know how they start barking. You know, Mr. Vice President, you're not here very often, but I love those folks behind the cameras. I tell people they're more important than the people in front, and I just want to thank you for being here again. It's been a great 7.5 years, and thank you for sharing so many important moments. Let's give a big hand to the guys, the women and men behind the cameras there. And if you all could move out for a second, you'll be able to take pictures afterwards. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to celebrate what has truly been a group effort. I want to take a moment, and when you go first, the role of the person who comes first is to thank all of the people who made this possible. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge the people who have piloted this project to the finish line. I want to begin with Ron Nichols, the General Manager of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Now, we all know, I've made a few changes there over the years, and you know, when the general, kind of like the Civil War, when the general wasn't winning battles, I removed him. We changed generals. And while there are a lot of people to thank, I want to thank Ron Nichols, because he was the general that helped to get this historic day to come. Let's give him a big hand, Ron Nichols. And I also want to acknowledge his dogged Senior Assistant General Manager, Aram Benyamin. You know, when I first said we would get to 20% renewables by 2010, when we were at 3% when we started, the dirtiest public utility in the United States of America, Aram looked at me and I could tell he thought I was crazy, and maybe I was, but he had the expertise, he had the knowledge, and he understood that ultimately he worked for the city and for the leadership of this city, and he helped to make today happen. Let's give him a big hand. The members of the Board of Commissioners of the LA Department of Water and Power, please stand. I want to thank you. I want to acknowledge you for your work. This couldn't have happened without you. You were dogged, you understood what the mission was, and mission accomplished. Thank you so much. And of course, they're in session, or I'm sorry, they're actually out of session. They're not here with us today, but I want to acknowledge the Los Angeles City Council. None of this could have happened without the support of the greenest, most progressive city council in our city's history. Let's give them a big hand. Oh, one of them is here. The chairman of Energy and the Environment, yes. Chairman Huizar is here with us. Thank you for being here and representing the council. And of course, a lot of you here. I want to thank the many nonprofit, business, and community groups that are here with us today, including an organization from whom I've received an endorsement every single race I've ever been in, no matter who I ran against, no matter what their environmental credentials. I want to acknowledge the Sierra Club. Give them a big hand. This was their idea, baby. This was their idea. It wasn't mine. I want to acknowledge the LA Business Council, who I know is here with us today. You know, we have, Mr. Vice President, the largest feed-in tariff program of any city in the United States of America because of that Business Council. Let's give them a big hand. They've been behind every environmental effort we've engaged in. I've always said that when you fight to protect the environment, when you fight to address the challenge of climate change, when you move away from our addiction to foreign oil, we can create good jobs, develop good technologies that will be the jobs and the technologies of the future. I want to acknowledge Scope and Lane, who are here with us, among the many other organizations. And by the way, both of them have been with me in every fight I've ever been in. And I'd like to welcome some very special guests to the city of Los Angeles. They come from a beautiful boutique city in Northern California. Today we're lucky enough to welcome Tom Steyer, co-founding director of Next Generation, and Mike Brune, the executive director of the Sierra Club. And today is a special moment for me. At my swearing in, I had the honor to have present the chairman of the Climate Reality Project, Nobel laureate, Oscar winner, but more importantly, my friend, Vice President Al Gore. And why I'm so honored is not just because he was a man who closed his eyes and saw the future and understood how important this issue of climate change was to our nation and our world and the next generation, but because he stood there or sat there that day when I said, dream with me. We will make Los Angeles the cleanest, greenest, big city in the United States of America. And I said to the vice president as we were walking up, they took a video of that day and they panned the audience, and there were many elected officials there that day. And you should have seen the smirks on their face. And he didn't have one on his. And I want to thank you for being here today as we acknowledge this day. No one in the country has done more to address the issue of climate change than you. For you to be here, to acknowledge what an historic day this is, means so much to me and so much to the people who are here today. Vice President Al Gore.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, we Angelenos like to call our city a city of angels. But when I was growing up in the 1950s and 60s, it was more like smog hell. Back then, the air quality in the LA basin would get so bad that we would have the West Coast version of snow days. Days that where the air was so thick with a sickly orange and brown haze that PE classes were canceled and we were confined to our classrooms. Now, many of you are too young to remember those days, but I see a few gray-haired people here. They remember them. The memories of those smog-filled decades stuck with me. I've always known that I didn't want my kids or my grandkids to grow up like that. And that's why when I became mayor of Los Angeles in 2005, I challenged Angelenos to work with me, to work with us, to make LA the cleanest, greenest, big city in America. The city of green angels. Now, to get there, we weren't going to think small. We were going to be bold. we were going to have big goals to meet. We'd have to take a comprehensive approach to reduce our emissions and green our city. So we set ambitious goals. Now, even though our federal government, and I can tell you, if this man had been elected president, the federal government would have signed the Kyoto Accords. But even though our federal government gave up on Kyoto, we didn't. There were about 150 mayors in July of 2005 that signed on to Kyoto. The month I got elected, I signed on too. We pledged to meet the Kyoto climate change protocols, and we did, 4 years ahead of time. But so you understand, today we're at 28% below Kyoto levels. In fact, today we are the leading American city and about 5th in the world. You should be proud of that. We set those goals. We demanded that we push ahead, and we did. Now, we've done it by quadrupling our use of renewable energy. We started at about 3 or 4%. Today we're at 20, and we'll keep on moving in that direction. Now, cleaning the air at the nation's port, the largest port, the biggest polluter in this region. We've reduced truck emissions by 80%. We've reduced sulfur oxides by 76%. We've reduced diesel particulates by 71%. And we've reduced nitrous oxides by 51%. No port in the world has cleaned up their port more than we have. You know, you probably don't know it, but we're the only city over 1 million, the only city over 1 million anywhere in the world that has synchronized every single traffic light, every single one of them. We're retrofitting our street lights with LED bulbs. We've passed the toughest green building standards in the nation and have more buildings with energy efficient buildings than any city in the nation. We're making unprecedented investments in our public transportation system. We are going to double the size of our light rail system, maybe in 30 years, but we've got a plan to do it in the next 10. And already we've opened 4 lines and we've broken ground on 4 others. But we're here today to celebrate something else. We promised to kick our coal addiction, and it hasn't been easy. Climbing a mountain for the first time is never easy. And when I challenged the DWP to get off of coal, there were already talks at Intermountain Power Plant, but those talks were about building another coal plant. This week, we signed an agreement ensuring that we will never again be coal power produced at IPP. And we took further actions that will permanently take Los Angeles off of coal. Today's celebration was never inevitable. It's taken an enormous amount of coordination and cooperation, of investment and preparation. It took 100 years to build up the power supply the DWP has today. But in a decade and a half, we're going to replace 70% of it. Right now, 40% of our power comes from coal plants. But by 2025, that number will be 0. We'll do it by replacing coal with renewable energy like wind, solar, and geothermal, by increasing energy efficiency, by balancing new sources with high efficiency natural gas. We'll reduce our citywide greenhouse gas emissions by 40, no, sorry. We'll reduce our citywide greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. We'll reduce the emissions from the Department of Water and Power by 60%. And we'll provide Angelenos with a coal-free, clean, and reliable energy supply. Los Angeles, we've come a long way, but the effects of climate change have no borders or boundaries. Our cooperative efforts to confront climate change must cross borders too. A new era of clean power is dawning, and we're blazing a new trail for the rest of the country and the world to follow. I'm happy to say that my kids and grandkids will be proud residents of a Los Angeles that is known for sustainability and not smog. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce one of the earliest and most insistent voices for taking decisive action on climate change. When too many people wanted to ignore the reality of our changing climate, Vice President Al Gore made the world pay attention. He made us face the facts, and he made us face the future. As a freshman Congress member, he held the first ever congressional hearing on global warming. He urged America to sign on to the Kyoto Protocol. Well, Mr. Vice President, we in Los Angeles heard you, and we're a proud signatory. His work, his film, his books, and a new one, by the way, just came out, have all helped to spread the message that we cannot wait another minute to solve our climate crisis. Please help me in welcoming the chairman of the Climate Reality Project, my friend, our Vice President, Al Gore.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Mayor Villaraigosa, thank you for your kind words, and I'm going to have a lot more to say about you in just a moment here, but I do want to follow your lead and express my respect, and on behalf of all of us here, the gratitude due to Ron Nichols, the general manager, and his team, to Michael Brune, of the Sierra Club and the Beyond Coal campaign, which has been such an important part of this. And to my friend Tom Steyer, who is a businessman, an innovator, an activist, and somebody who I respect enormously because he gets up every day thinking, like I do, what can we do to solve the climate crisis? And we all really appreciate that, Tom. You and your wife, Kat, have done an amazing job. All right, here's what I want to say. Those of you who are gathered here, those of you from the press, those of you who've worked on this, those who haven't, you've all seen and heard probably innumerable announcements at events superficially similar to this, and you kind of expect good things to be said, and what does it really mean in the end? I want to say in the strongest way I possibly can, this is a really big deal. This is a really big deal. And of all the people who have played a part in this, there is one person who is really responsible for it, and that is your mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa. What a great leader. Amazing. You know, here we are in an era when a lot of us who are Americans worry that our government is broken. Certainly in Washington, D.C., there's ample evidence that we have a sclerotic system now. You know, they can't pass this, can't pass that. And I'm not here to rag on them. I'm here to draw a contrast. Because what you have done, Mr. Mayor, and what your team and the people of Los Angeles have done is to not only take a dramatic and inspiring step to help solve the climate crisis, you're also inspiring hope that democracy works in America. And with leadership, we can do great things. In my faith tradition, there is a saying, and you all know it, whatever your own tradition, where there is no vision, the people perish. Well, the converse of that is where there is vision and leadership, creativity, imagination, and absolute determination, then the people prosper and thrive. And that is what today's event really is all about. The mayor mentioned that there are a few other cities in the world that have tried to do something like this. Let me tell you what they are: London, Toronto, Copenhagen, and Berlin. Los Angeles joins that list of the 5 greatest cities in the world where combating global warming is concerned. Congratulations to everyone. And the only one in the United States, the only one. And by the way, a new economic report came out yesterday showing that here in our country, green jobs have grown 3 times as fast as in all of the other sectors. We are seeing economic empowerment and development and prosperity. And there were people who said that couldn't happen. You know, the cost of solar energy has come down so rapidly, 80% in 5 years. And the more of it we use, the cheaper it gets. The more coal and oil we use, the more expensive it gets. So, you know, that tells us something about the future. Australia just released a major study that electricity from wind in Australia is now cheaper than electricity from a new coal plant or from a new gas plant. In 2010, on a global basis, for the first time in world history, aggregate economic global investments in renewable energy exceeded and surpassed investments in fossil fuel energy. We have signs of hope that are meaningful, and we ought to understand this is not a hopeless task at all. It can't be, by the way. We're being tested by history. Never before have we faced a challenge anything remotely like what the climate crisis represents for the future of humankind. We're still on a global basis putting 90 million tons of global warming pollution into the Earth's atmosphere every single day as if it's an open sewer. And it traps heat. It obeys the laws of physics, as the scientists told us would happen. And the amount that's accumulated up there as a result of human global warming pollution now traps enough heat energy every day to represent the amount of heat energy contained in 400,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs going off every 24 hours. Now, it's a big planet, but that's a lot of energy. And that's what's evaporating a lot more water from the oceans. That's why the air holds so much more water vapor and causes these historic downpours and gigantic floods in so many places in the world. Pakistan, Australia, Queensland got 2.5 feet of rain in 48 hours 2 weeks ago. My home city of Nashville, 2 years ago, thousands of my neighbors lost their homes and businesses, had no flood insurance because it had never flooded there before. But that extra heat energy is also what's drying out the soil and making the droughts deeper and wider and longer and more destructive. Last year in the United States, 61% of our country suffered from extreme drought. 53% is still in drought through the winter. Deutsche Bank estimated in their calculations it knocked a full percentage point of GDP off of our production in the United States last year. We had record fires again last year. The biggest outbreak of West Nile virus ever in Texas. The public authorities in some cities put out an appeal for people to stop calling 911 when they got a mosquito bite. And you can understand why they would. But these are all linked. Then, of course, we had Superstorm Sandy. Part of the $110 billion in disaster-related climate damage that we had in our country last year. You were kind enough to mention the movie that I was associated with that this city produced a few years ago. The single most common attack from the deniers of that movie was they pointed to the part of the movie that had an illustration of how the ocean water would go into the World Trade Center Memorial Site. How ridiculous and demagogic and absurd, they said. Well, it happened at the end of October last year, way ahead of schedule. And a lot of people have looked back on Superstorm Sandy and all the damage that it did as a kind of a turning point. Now, internationally, not enough's being done. At the federal level, not enough is being done. But here in Los Angeles, and by the way, in quite a few other cities and communities around our country, none of them approaching the success of Los Angeles. That's why we're here celebrating here today. But in lots of places, we are seeing tremendous progress. Let me tell you, and I'll conclude with this, we have to win the conversation on the climate crisis. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The special interests have been working overtime to try to pretend that it's not real. They don't want people to realize that dirty energy creates dirty weather. They want to pretend that it's just some kind of fraud, that the scientists around the world, every National Academy of Science, every professional scientific society, 97% of the climate scientists, they want to pretend they're all lying and that they're just in cahoots somehow. Well, it's the same thing the tobacco industry did. You remember when the Surgeon General put out that report and the tobacco companies hired actors and dressed them up as doctors and paid them to look into the TV cameras and say, I'm a doctor, there's nothing wrong with smoking, it won't make you sick, it is immoral. And what these carbon polluters are doing today is immoral.
That's right.
But here's the point I want to make. When they've got so much power in Washington, D.C., and they do, it's kind of pathetic, really, that our democracy's been hacked at the national level. It's been hacked. The operating system's been taken over. And they can't pass any reform unless they beg for permission from the special interests most affected by it. And it's time for the American people to say enough is enough. We're going to take our country back. We want American democracy again. Now, I remember growing up as a young boy much of the time in the American South in Tennessee. And I remember as a child when the conversation on civil rights was won. Somebody in my circle made some racist comment and somebody else in my circle spoke up and said, shut up, man, we don't talk like that anymore. We won that conversation, and millions of conversations went that way. I saw a story, some of y'all probably saw it too, about 3-4 weeks ago. 2 gay men waiting in a long line to get pizza, holding hands. And some homophobe came up and made a nasty comment to him, and according to the story, literally every other person in that line turned on that man and said, "Shut up, man, we don't talk like that anymore." We are winning that conversation. If somebody had told you 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that on this beautiful March day, 58-60% of the American people would say we are in favor of gay marriage, you would have said, no, we can't change that much that fast. But we can, and we did, and we will win the carbon conversation, because we have been inspired by the City of Angels. We have been inspired by Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. Thank you.
My God. How long? Ah, Jesus Christ.
You know, I campaigned all over the country for Al Gore, and I couldn't have been prouder. And listening to him speak, not just about the issue of climate change, but to see him speak about the many issues we've confronted as a nation over the last few years. He is so right. The day will come when the Congress understands that the 97% of the climate scientists are right, that this issue of climate change is in large part created by us, and that it's incumbent on all of us to do something about it. Thank you for being the voice in the wind. Thank you for never giving up. Thank you for your leadership. You know, I said when you come first, you got to thank the folks that are here. All of the things we've done. You know, in the last 7.5 years, 650 acres of parks. Well, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot to you, but so that you understand, it's double what we did in the 12 years before that. When you look across the board, a 20% reduction in our water use. We use the same amount of water today that we did 40 years ago. And in fact, with more, double, what, 1.5 million more people. But so that you understand, everybody, the lowest per capita use of water of any big city in the United States. We recycle 76% of our trash. We were at 62 when we started. They told me that we wouldn't get beyond 65 in the 8 years of time. We're at 76 today, and it is without question because of organizations like the ones represented here. The NRDC has been with us from the beginning. There have been many, many organizations with us, but one of them is the Sierra Club. And I said a few minutes ago, this wasn't my idea. I was focused on getting to 20% renewables, and I didn't understand why, well, that was a first in the state. It wasn't as big a thing as I had thought. Taking us from 3 or 4% to 20% by 2010, why isn't it a big thing? And a lot of the environmental leaders said, well, it's a good thing, Mr. Mayor, but you're still the dirtiest public utility in America. You have an over-reliance on coal. And so the Sierra Club said to me, we got to get out of coal. And I said, well, how do we do it? And they laid out a broad blueprint, and I went to the DWP, and everybody looked at me and said, yeah, right. It's not going to happen. So I wanted to, today, I wanted the Sierra Club to be here. This would not have happened without you. It would not have happened if you weren't pushing and setting the bar high, representing the national grassroots movement to move us beyond coal is the executive director of the Sierra Club, Mike Brune.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everybody. I want to just start today by thanking the mayor for not only having the vision and the passion to articulate a bold idea, an idea that at the time seemed unreasonable, but the skill and the tenacity and the determination to make that idea into reality. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for all your leadership. And I want to thank the members of the board of the LADWP for taking that idea, which at first glance seemed hard to do, almost impossible to do, scary to do politically, difficult to do operationally, and turning it into reality. We have a great vision that we now can export all across the state, all across the country, and all around the world, and it's due in large part to your leadership. So thank you very much. I also want to say that I'm very proud and excited to be on the stage here today with a fellow leader from my boutique city of San Francisco, Tom Steyer, who's been fighting for the state of California for so long. And he is a man who is both idealistic and he's got a lot of fight in him. So thank you very much, Mr. Steyer. And then finally, I want to thank my opening act here, Mr. Vice President, for decades of leadership on climate change, speaking out when very few will, and believing in the power of activism to produce great results. You all might recall in some of the Vice President's earlier speeches and in his great movie where he talked about denial and how denial is not just a river in Egypt. And he talked about how despair really isn't a tire that you put in your trunk. But what we are here today for, the reason why you see so many smiling faces, the reason why there are so many people tuning in on the internet, is because today's announcement here in Los Angeles is an antidote to despair. It gives us hope. Over the last year, when wildfires have been raging across the country, when the drought that has been crippling the Farm Belt, when Superstorm Sandy and other severe storms caused severe economic hardship, including the town that I grew up in, including the house that I lived in for my first 20 years, City of Los Angeles during that time has been investing in solutions, investing in energy efficiency so that this city now, as the mayor said a few minutes ago, leads the country in energy efficient buildings, certified energy efficient buildings. Over the last several years, as our leaders inside, as our elected officials inside the Beltway have missed almost every opportunity to lead on climate change and accelerate a transition to clean energy, the City of Los Angeles hasn't complained. They've gotten to work and they've produced results. They've invested in the largest clean energy contract, solar contract in the country, 150 megawatts here within city limits. They're investing in clean energy, like with the Moapa Band of Paiutes, large-scale solar and wind outside of city limits. They're investing deep in energy efficiency here as well. And at a time when we're seeing how fossil fuel companies not only are polluting our air and our water and our atmosphere, but polluting our politics, the City of Los Angeles is articulating a way beyond fossil fuels and beyond coal. And that's the leadership that we need, not just in Los Angeles, but all around the country. I can't stress enough how powerful an example this is for those of us who are working on the front lines in confronting dirty fuels. And it's taken a community of activists, of volunteers, and of organizations. The mayor gave off a great roll call. NRDC has been powerful here in Los Angeles and across the country. Global Green, Scope, Lane, Interfaith Power and Light, a whole community of faith leaders.
Coalition for Clean Air.
Coalition for Clean Air, CBE, Greenpeace, NRDC, the Sierra Club, Los Angeles Business Council. I can go on and on and on. Hundreds of organizations, even here in LA, uniting around a common vision. So what we'll do is we will take this vision, the reality that we're creating together in Los Angeles, and make sure that that vision is carried all across the country. Because what we're seeing is that even though it's true, the sun rises in the east, clean energy is rising in the west.
That's right.
Clean energy is rising in the west.
It really is.
You want to know what that means? That means the coal plant, the biggest coal plant in Washington, in Centralia, massive coal plant, is soon going to be coming offline, replaced with energy efficiency and a whole lot of wind. The single biggest coal plant in Oregon, the Boardman coal plant just outside of Portland, is coming offline, and it's going to be replaced with energy efficiency and a whole lot of wind. What else does it mean? We've got Southern California Edison, who's going to be moving out and finalizing their deal to move out over the next couple months out of the Four Corners coal plant in New Mexico. Department of Water and Resources, also here, is going to be moving out of the Reed Gardner coal plant. We've got smaller publicly owned utilities who are going to be moving out of the San Juan generating station. We're going to take California coal-free. We're going to join Oregon in going coal-free. We're going to join the state of Washington in going coal-free. We're going to skip over fossil fuels and invest in clean energy. And this is building on the momentum that we're creating all across the country. Over the last couple years, grassroots community groups, unpaid activists, everyday local organizations have been working together. Together we have defeated 175 proposed coal plants all across the United States. Over the last 3 years, we have worked together to secure the retirement of more than 140 additional coal plants that will be coming offline over the next couple years. And what we know is that each time a coal plant comes offline, we've got a whole lot of cheap, affordable, accessible, technologically viable, clean energy that can take its place. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership. Thank you to all of the city council members, members of the activist community here in Los Angeles, for all of your leadership, your persistence, your tenacity. We will take this vision, we will spread it across the country, and we won't give up until the job is done. Thank you, everybody.
By the way, we've been joined by Council Member Bill Rosendahl. I want to acknowledge him. Part of the greenest, most progressive city council we've ever had. By the way, I do want to clarify something, because I did joke about the boutique city, and I did that only because of this. I was saying to both Mike and Tom, you know, when you look at LA isn't, it's not a city that is as accustomed to the kind of consensus and homogeneity of political thought that you might have in San Francisco. This is a city that in many ways is a microcosm of the country. And a lot of what we've been able to do with all of you has required an education effort, has had a great deal of resistance, a whole lot of naysayers. And there wasn't the political will in the beginning to do so much of this. But in many ways, we learned from what you all have done up there and in places around the country. And so I want to acknowledge the next speaker, who also comes from that city, San Francisco. He's a businessman and a philanthropist. He's the guy who had the tenacity and the smarts to get Prop 39 over the finish line last fall. He's the co-founding director of Next Generation, Tom Steyer.
So,
let's start with what I'm not. I'm not the mayor of Los Angeles. I'm not the former vice president or senator. I didn't win a Nobel Prize or an Academy Award. And I don't head the biggest environmental organization in the country. So I think my job today as a private citizen and as a business person is to bear witness for all of us, for all you guys in the audience and everybody else in California, to this signal accomplishment. Now, before I start to do that, let me just bring up one concept which has been filling my mind for the last year. Because I think a lot of us started to think about climate when Vice President Gore started to bring it to our attention, and maybe a little before. And that was a great service that he did for us. But about a year ago, I started to think about it in a different way, and it had to do with a single word, which is urgency. What is the timing of this? How fast do we have to act? Because the speed with which this crisis comes at us dictates at some level what we have to do about it. So as I started to read the science, and I'm no scientist, and probably most of you aren't scientists either, I started to understand that this was coming at us much faster than people understood. That when you got scientists alone, they started talking about the need to move off the curve we're on immediately. That instead of talking about this as a 2050 problem, we should talk about this as a 2030 problem. That we have to move off this curve within the next 5 years. So the point of what Mayor Villaraigosa has done today, the point of all the work that the people in this audience and the people who've been so righteously thanked before, is that we're doing something now. That we've actually come to grips with a very difficult problem that people said was insurmountable, and figured out a way, in a realistic way, in a way that will not hurt business in California, where we will prosper, to deal with it in an efficient way and to set an example for the country. Now, let me keep talking for 1 second about urgency, because I'm also up here as a business person. And a lot of the conversation that goes on about climate has to do with politics, and it has to do with activism, and all of those things are necessary parts of this. But when the time comes, when we have the right rules, when we've set ourselves the correct goals, the execution of this is going to have to be done by American business. We're going to have Los Angelinos who go out and make this happen. When we've decided what has to happen, we're going to set the goals, but they're going to have to go out and do it. And this has happened a couple of times before in the United States. You know, we had a problem with the ozone layer, and everybody said, it's not a problem. If it is a problem, there's nothing we can do about it. If there's something we can do about it, it's going to be so expensive that it's probably not worth doing. But the fact is, we overcame that. Business did it much faster than anyone expected, and the payoff in terms of expense to reward has been estimated at 76 to 1. So that was the first time. That was in the 80s. And then we had a problem where basically we had to set up a cap and trade system for acid rain. And once again, there were people in the business community who said, it's not a problem, the science is not really sure. And they said, if it is a problem, it's going to be incredibly expensive. But they set up a cap and trade system in 1989, and it was solved much cheaper and much faster than anyone expected. That when you get political leadership like we're seeing today, the results will be better than anybody can forecast, because people in Los Angeles and people across the United States are smarter and more innovative than anyone gives them credit for. What they're looking for is the vision. What they're looking for is the leadership, and then we can do better than anyone would expect. And when it came to acid rain, the payoff was about 41 to 1. So when we look at this problem and people say, first of all, it's not warming. Second of all, if it is warming, it has nothing to do with man's behavior. And third of all, if it does have to do with man's behavior, it's probably good for the planet. We've heard this all before. And what we need to do is challenge ourselves, which is what's happening today, to succeed beyond our wildest dreams. So before let me get personal for 1 second. Because of what I see as the urgency, because I think the time is so short, I'd set up an investment business 30 years ago, and we had a mandate to invest across all industries. We had pooled investment vehicles. And largely as a result of that, I had to quit because I felt as if I need to square what I believe is right with what I was doing in my own life. And I asked them to green my portfolio, and I asked them to create investment products for institutions and endowments that would also take into account dirty fuels, that would take environment into account in making investments, so that people can do what they probably already want to do. And what I see today in Los Angeles is two things. I see substance. What is happening is in and of itself very important. This is real leadership. But I think beyond that, it's symbolism. Because you're making a statement in one of the biggest cities in the United States that this is doable, that the people who will do it are reasonable, and that we will succeed when everyone is telling us it won't happen. So when I look forward from here, I do want to thank all the people. I mean, we have people both up here and in the audience who have done really incredible work. I mean, I think Mayor Villaraigosa honestly has done something here that people are going to notice not only in the United States but around the world. And I think he really deserves your heartfelt applause and admiration for getting this over the finish line. And I think, you know, honestly, once you win a Nobel Prize, I don't think getting compliments from a businessman from San Francisco is particularly relevant, but nonetheless, nonetheless, he deserves them. And Michael Brune has done an amazing job, honestly, in terms of remaking the Sierra Club. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but he's made it much more activist. He's pushed it, he's made it really relevant, and Michael's been doing an amazing job. Now, this has been a long process, and I want to just finish by saying this. Everybody here knows that this is a pretty tough time in the United States of America. It's been a tough time for at least 4 years. Our fellows, everyone here knows that some of our fellow citizens have been suffering and continue to suffer. But we also know that the cost of inaction on this topic is much higher than anyone is willing to admit. That not making a decision on this is making a decision on this, and that you cannot put the future on hold. So I think everybody here should give themselves, and certainly the 3 other people up here, a huge round of applause for looking into the future and deciding to do the right thing. And it's incumbent on us to succeed as a model for the rest of the country and the rest of the world, that we have to prosper in doing this so people can understand this is going to be profitable, it's going to be successful, and business will be better for it. Thank you.
We are there now. Thank you so much, Tom. I just have to ask, I don't see any, are there any Spanish language cameras? There are? Oh, they're streaming live. Okay, so let me say a few words in Spanish, because I can. Gracias a todos los presentes, y por supuesto en especial el vicepresidente Al Gore por acompañarnos. Cuando me convertí en alcalde en Los Ángeles de 2005, desafié a los angelinos y les pedí que trabajaran conmigo para convertir a la ciudad de Los Ángeles en la ciudad más limpia, más verde de todos en los Estados Unidos. I love it. People actually understand Spanish in LA. I love it. Más verde de todos, ya dije eso. Así que fijamos metas ambiciosas. Reducimos nuestras emisiones de carbón aún más que cualquier otra ciudad en el país. Lo hicimos a través del uso de energías renovables, limpiando el aire del puerto más grande de la nación, sincronizando nuestras señales de tráfico y readaptando nuestras luces en la calle a focos con emisor de luz de diodo. Y también lo hemos hecho invirtiendo en nuestro sistema de transporte público. Pero a lo largo de esto prometimos una cosa más. Nos comprometimos a librar esta ciudad de carbón. Y I love that you understand. I just love it. You know, actually, Mr. Vice President, I was born here. I'm 3rd generation Angelino. I didn't speak a lick of Spanish when I first got elected. I've learned a little bit. I got a little better over the years. Y esta semana hemos tomado acciones que permanentemente eliminarán nuestra dependencia al carbón. Hoy en día, aproximadamente el 40% de la energía proviene de plantas de carbón, pero en el año 2021 ese número será 0. Sí se puede. Se puede. Todo esto será posible gracias a las energías renovables o energías del futuro, y son aquellas que producen electricidad al partir del sol, el viento y el agua. Proporcionaremos a los angelinos una fuente de energía de carbón libre, limpia y confiable. Los Ángeles ha recorrido un largo camino, pero una nueva era de energía limpia está por llegar, y estamos trascendiendo fronteras y abriendo un nuevo camino para el resto del país. Muchas gracias a todos. Now, this was a press event, and as is our custom, I'll take a few questions from the press, and if there are no questions, all is good. We'll take some pictures. Thank you very much.